Hey guys, welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on UNSAFE TV. This story today is one of those troubling stories of a local government overreach that it's disturbing. The guy in this case is one of those people that we've all met him, right? We've all had to deal with him before in the past. You know, one of the things about having a farm or a homestead is that it takes a lot of infrastructure, it takes a lot of investment, it takes a lot of personal commitment. And we put that in because, number one, we're trying to make things better for our families. We want to give our kids something to look forward to. The other reason why we're doing that is because we recognize that there is a growing problem in this world when it comes to the public, our communities, having access to fresh local foods. The foods that they're buying at the grocery store, even the ones that look fresh, are packaged in gases, they're treated with chemicals, they're injected with things to make them look plump and fresh on the grocery store shelf after having traveled hundreds to thousands of miles to make it to the grocery store. What you're getting there is not healthy, it's not good for you. And yet a lot of people are just now waking up to that. But even when they do, finding a source for good, nutritious, healthy food can be really, really difficult. So a lot of people who have homesteads, a lot of people who have small farms who are trying to go direct to consumer are doing that in part because they believe that the food that they're growing, the product that they're putting out there is better for their community, and they want to play a positive part in their community. That's exactly what Virginia Loop is doing. She wants to build a greenhouse, a year-round greenhouse. This is a greenhouse that's built partly into the ground because this is in Divide, Colorado, and it's about 150 feet in length. It's a beautiful greenhouse. She wants to build this greenhouse to provide her community with accessibility to good, healthy, nutritious foods. And she wants to be able to build a legacy for her kids. She wants to create a business for her kids where they can sell those local foods to their community and they can do something that is beneficial, something that's helping people. There's nothing better in this world than a product that actually benefits people. We get so many products these days that are completely unbeneficial to us, like artificial intelligence. So this is a very interesting story, and I wonder in a lot of cases how this is going to play out, because I think that there's a lot of legal arguments in Virginia's favor. But as we get into this, and this isn't my description of the people involved, it is what I have read online. I'm just going to share that with you. But like I said, we've all met these people. What they're trying to do is make her take down this greenhouse, which she at this point in time has $150,000 invested into. Over a year after they essentially, the same department gave them the green light to continue building the greenhouse. So Virginia's greenhouse is about 2,856 square feet. You know, 150 feet in length sounds pretty big to a lot of people, but this is not an invasive structure. It's not something that stands out. You know, like I said, it's partially built into the ground to be a year-round greenhouse. And if you live in the South, if you live in areas where there are a lot of chicken houses, those chicken houses are about 500 square feet or 500 feet in length. So this is 150 feet in length. It's really not. In my opinion, it's really not that big. For a commercial greenhouse, it's actually relatively small. They're not going to produce, you know, a factory of food out of this thing. It's just something that's going to be able to serve their community in a positive way. So Virginia Loop has this 5-acre parcel. It's zoned residential right outside of Divide, Colorado in Teller County. And this is where this 5-acre parcel is where this greenhouse is located. I don't know the laws of Colorado. I know in some states there's a minimum acreage requirement for your land to be considered agriculture, but there are in Colorado specifically, there are other things that could line up in her favor here. For example, even if she has less than 5 acres of land, if the land that she is using is primarily used for agriculture, if it has agricultural buildings on it, the tax assessor can choose to tax it as agricultural property. But I think it's important in this case to pay attention to the fact that the zoning, regardless of the zoning on the property, it doesn't matter. Because under Colorado state law, it's the tax assessor's opinion of the use of the property and how they tax that property that gives any exemptions to building codes or anything else. It has absolutely nothing to do with zoning. And that's where the Teller County Building Department doesn't really quite know what they're doing, because they're claiming that she's on residential property and so she can't build the structure there. But the state law clearly states that the property itself, it depends on how it is taxed. Okay, and this is actually the Teller County Building Code, which does come from the state building code, but work exempt from permit shall include agricultural buildings located in incorporated or unincorporated areas, regardless of zoning classification, provided the land is classified as agricultural by the county assessor and setbacks are met. So as long as she has her setbacks met, the county assessor assesses that property as farmland or as agricultural use, which, I mean, obviously with a 150-foot greenhouse on it, what else would you be using it for? But as long as they choose to tax it that way, the county has no say in anything. Zoning doesn't matter, building codes don't matter. And that's kind of an easy fix, if you ask me. But I wanted to get a little more into the story and the different arguments that have been thrown back and forth, because as of right now, she has received 2 stop work orders on this project. One of them was lifted, then she proceeded, and then she received another one. And now they're asking her to take this entire structure down. So back in June of 2024, let's go to the very beginnings of this. A Teller County Building Code official, new guy, shows up on her property as she's building out this large greenhouse. And he asks her, well, excuse me, ma'am, what are you building there? She says, well, I'm building a greenhouse. And he asked if he could see the plans. She shared with him the plans. She also shared with him the building code that I just shared with you, that agricultural buildings are exempt from building permits and requirements so long as they're used for agriculture, the setbacks are met. And of course, the tax assessor taxes the property as agriculture. Has nothing to do with zoning, it's right in the code. Zoning has nothing to do with it. So at that time, she had a conversation with code enforcement. Code enforcement reviewed the case and said, okay, you don't need a permit, you may continue. So she continued on. And then as she got this structure completed a year later, back in May of this year, she decided, you know what, we need to add electricity to this building. Now, if you want to add electricity to the building, you need a permit. That's usually how these types of things work. You can put up an agricultural building. We have a workshop on our property. It doesn't have any electricity in it. I had to pay $50 for an agricultural permit where I live, but I mean, it wasn't a big deal. And it's really only $50 to get an electrical permit in this area, but she did not, at that time, pay anything for an agricultural permit because that's what the building code said, but she went in to get her electrical permit. When she got her electrical permit, she was met with a stop work order. And I believe at this point in time, they actually had temporarily lifted the stop work order, allowed her to go in and place another $15,000 in electrical in there, because I mean, sometimes you have to wonder if the intent of these counties is to purposely bankrupt people. You know, at this point, she's got $150,000 invested in this greenhouse project. And then on May 8th, they send her another stop work order after she's already put all this money into it. And in that stop work order, they tell her that she needs to take the whole thing down, that it's not permitted, it's not allowed under county code. You know how all this goes. Virginia Loop was pretty active at trying to tackle this issue, and she was very respectful of the entire process. She went down to the building department. She tried to meet with people. Tried to meet with people is the key word, because it's always difficult to meet with somebody. Finally, after 20 days, so this is now May 28th, after, receiving numerous promises for callbacks and everything else, she was able to secure a meeting with this Director Shallow, the director of the Building Code Enforcement Division of Teller County. This guy walks in about 20 minutes late, doesn't shake her hand, acts very impatient when she's talking to her. He's just telling her, get to the point, get to the point, get to the point, slamming his hands down on the table. According to Virginia, it felt like there was just a wall between them. No matter what she said, no matter how she tried to communicate with this guy, he was just shutting her down. He was shutting her down from the get-go. He was disrespecting her by being 20 minutes late. This is somebody who, from the description I read, sounds like somebody who takes their position a little too seriously. According to Virginia's own comments, she left this meeting absolutely devastated, and she felt like the feeling that she got from working with this building department was it wasn't about interpretation of what the law was. Not that either one of them is supposed to be interpreting the law, that's up to attorneys. The building code department shouldn't be making their own interpretations of what the law is. But she said it felt more like it was just a matter of power. They had to exert their power over her. After the meeting, the building code director actually called her up because he couldn't find the code himself. He called her up asking for page numbers and everything. So Director Swallow, just for your reference, it is R105.2-12. R105.2-12. So there's also a state level protection in this that I think Virginia actually has a pretty good case at making. Because at this point, clearly the people in Teller County are off the hinge. So getting the Teller County tax collector to suddenly start charging agricultural rates on a property that's being used for agriculture is going to be asking a lot of them. I mean, to even be able to figure out what the use is might be asking too much from them. So there's what they call the Colorado Farm Stand Act. This is HB 19-1191. And under this Farm Stand Act, no county, no city is allowed to prohibit a farm, homestead, whatever it is, from putting up a farm stand to sell non-processed farm foods. So they could sell anything from honey to eggs to vegetables grown in the greenhouse. If it's a farm stand used for the purposes of selling those items, according to the state, they have the right to have that farm stand and nobody can say anything about it. Now, you might think that a 150-foot greenhouse is mighty large for a farm stand. However, if they're selling directly out of the greenhouse, it could qualify as a farm stand because there's nothing in the state that actually describes what a farm stand is. Either way, you would assume that a farm stand is a commercial place of business for selling on-farm goods. And in this particular case, it would appear as though she's building a place to sell, a commercial place to sell on-farm goods that were raised off the farm that are not processed. And I just want to make it clear that this State Farm Act applies to parcels of any size, regardless of zoning. It is a state law that overrides the county, overrides the city, overrides everybody else. The law specifically reads, a local government shall not prohibit a farm stand operated for the sale of raw and unprocessed agricultural products grown or produced on site, regardless of parcel size. Now, the law doesn't necessarily say that greenhouses are exempt, but if the greenhouse itself is part of the structure in which they will be conducting the sales out of, that's a farm stand, there's a very, very strong legal argument that the county needs to butt the heck out. Now, this is another good point made by Rachel Lynn, who is a land use attorney in Denver, and that is that the state law that I just read to you actually protects the operation, the farm stand operation, from a county or city coming in and tell them they can't have a farm stand. It protects the commercial operation. And a lot of courts may read into this and rule that any accessory to that operation is therefore also protected, which would include the greenhouse, even if they weren't selling the products directly out of the greenhouse. Although it sounds like that was kind of the plan, was to sell directly out of the greenhouse, not have a separate farm stand. But even if she did, there's still a very compelling point there that this is a part of the farm stand operation. They're selling these products directly from the farm, regardless of parcel size, regardless of zoning, on site through a farm stand operation. It's an accessory. It's necessary for the business. Again, the county shouldn't have any say in this whatsoever. Now, as for the other state law that she had referenced about the agricultural use and the fact that buildings are exempt as long as the assessor says that property is used for agricultural purposes. She can go in and appeal to the assessor's department right now. She could do this. She can go in there and appeal to them and say, this property is now being used for agricultural purposes and needs to be taxed under the state law and county county code as an agricultural parcel. He's actually compelled to change that zoning. I kind of was joking around earlier about this, but he is compelled to change his assessment of that property from residential to agricultural, at least that portion of the property. The only reason why he wouldn't do that is if he went out there and found out that she was growing things for personal use, but you wouldn't do that in a 150-foot greenhouse. You might do it in a 12-foot greenhouse or a 16-foot greenhouse, but not 150 feet. So she has a good reason to go. She doesn't have to necessarily prove her sales at this point in time. All she has to do is prove her intent for sales, have the assessor change the classification, county's out of it. So right now she is looking into petitioning the county assessor for reclassification. She's also looking into a Rule 106 appeal in court. She could also look for a zoning variance or a special use permit under residential, but I don't see why she would need to do that. She just needs the assessor to tax the property as agricultural use, and she's using it as agriculture. And then of course, media attention and public attention really helps out in cases like this, because right now, the way this sits is the county's doing everything they can, the building code department's doing everything they can to not just shut this down, but destroy $150,000 worth of investment by forcing her hand at taking this entire project down. They don't necessarily have the right to do it, because at this point in time, she has more moves than they do to make it 100% legal. The only thing that they can possibly say is that she built a structure without determining whether or not it was agriculture or not, without going through the permitting department. But she doesn't have to go through the permitting department, because it's an agricultural structure. She just needs to get the land assessed correctly for agricultural use, since that's what she's going to be using it for. And she's going to be selling directly off of her property, which qualifies it as a farm stand. And if she's going to build another little structure, she could eventually just say it's an accessory to the farm stand. But it sounded to me, from what I read, that she was actually planning on using the greenhouse as the farm stand in and of itself. So at this point in time, really the county has a weak legal argument, but they're still trying to strong arm her. And the story is the description of this guy, this enforcement guy. This is where I think we need to go into a lot of our building departments, a lot of our bureaucratic departments, and just clear house. These people act as though a lot of times that they're above us in some sort of way. But what they're really there for is they're there to work for us, there to protect us, make sure that things are done in a way that's safe, in a way that doesn't destroy other property values. Nothing she's doing is unsafe or destroying other property values. Everything that she's doing is actually protected by state law, with the exception of a few little nuances that could be easily fixed. Anyway, when I read the story, it reminded me of the little 16-year-old girl in Wake Forest a year ago, when the county came in and gave her a stop work order because she was building crush and run pads to have a clean space for her apiaries for her bees. A little girl selling honey was getting shut down by the county, threatened not to touch her bees, not to take care of her bees, to water her bees, to check for mites. She couldn't do anything with her bees. She couldn't feed her bees, because what they said was she was building something that she wasn't allowed to build. I mean, good heavens, there's a couple stands with beehives on it, an aggregate below it, natural material. No different than landscaping your home. Next thing you know, if you try and put a bush out front, rose bush, they're going to want a permit for that rose bush. And that's why we have to speak up about these things. We have to make it known. And I think that, counties need to know when their employees are acting this way, so that they can handle that situation. If we just let it sit around and be quiet, it's just going to keep happening. Now, I wouldn't say this guy was having a bad day. This sounds like this guy was having a whole bad month, year. Anyway, guys, stay tuned for more stories like this here on UNSAFE TV. I've got a whole lot of stuff to talk to you about. I was off traveling for a bit, so we've got a lot of catching up to do with things to mail out. But we're getting all that caught up now, and we'll get our stories caught up as well.